At the turn of the 20th century, America was a land of limitless possibility. The skyline rose with steel and ambition, bold, daring, and unstoppable. Fueled by the American dream, small-town entrepreneurs built companies that reshaped industries and uplifted their communities. Innovation became the heartbeat of our nation. In 1912, local business leaders united with a shared purpose: to create a single voice dedicated to defending free enterprise, empowering businesses to serve people, provide solutions, and strengthen society. That voice became the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, committed to advancing economic freedom and opportunity for every American. For over a century, we've been a driving force at the crossroads of progress, shattering barriers, fueling growth, and creating opportunities for people building better lives. We don't just support business, we ignite it. From local startups to global enterprises, we create an environment where potential thrives, empowering communities, leaders, and creators to transform bold ideas into lasting impact. Working with and for a local, national, and global federation of partners, we fight for American businesses in the courts, in state capitals, in Washington, and on the world stage. Steadfast in our principles, unwavering in our resolve, uncompromising in doing what's right. This is America's story, written with vision, bound by conviction, illustrated through courage, and enriched by the hard work of everyday people, local business owners, and global visionaries who continue to define us. It's an enduring legacy of strength, determination, and shared ambition. One we proudly build upon as we work to write the next chapter of our nation's story. Join us. Together, let's build a future of growth and opportunity for the pursuit.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to C Street to Main Street. I'm Jeanette Mulvey, the editor-in-chief of Co. Today, I'm joined by Andy Dunn. Andy was a co-founder of Bonobos, the menswear company, and today he's an investor and an entrepreneur starting a brand new venture that he'll be telling us all about. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Dell, Oracle, and Square. We're always appreciative of your partnership in this series. So, Andy, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. I know our audience does too. So you founded Bonobos, which for those who don't know, was one of the first direct-to-consumer e-commerce brands. So what that means is you sold the product directly from a website to the customer without a retailer being in the middle. And at the time, that was a pretty unique and original new idea. It was revolutionary. So just tell me what made you believe that this new idea was going to work?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. Did I think it was going to work or not? But you chose the right word, which was believe, and absolutely did. I think it was being the customer myself. You know, it was cool when the product line was originally developed by my co-founder. I started as a customer, and I can remember putting my first pair of Bonobos on. It was a blue turquoise pinwheel corduroy with stretch and a really fun floral pocket liner that was kind of pink and hints of light blue, and was one of those things you try on an article of clothing that you like and you kind of light up. You feel a little more attractive. You feel a little more confident. And so that was the beginning of knowing that people will like this, because I did. And of course, we never know how big that universe is, but I felt like if I just can get to more people like me and like my co-founder at the time, there's something to be done here. And then we had a party at our house one day. This was in Atherton, California, where we were living when we started the company in grad school. And we invited all these guys over, and we had stacks of pants in the house. And we sold $16,000 worth of pants that day. And it was like, okay, if we're selling that much to our friends, and it's actually a legal substance that we're selling, like $16,000. We moved $16,000 worth of product. That's a good sign that you're on your way. And then, the idea was, how do we reach more people like it? And that's where this concept of like, let's just do it all on the internet was born. And people would ask me, well, you can take a brand online, but who's built a brand online? And the answer was no one had. And that was sort of a fun challenge to embark on.
Yeah, was that part of the appeal for you? Were you a person who said, I don't want to do it the way everybody else has done it. I want to do so. I mean, they're pants, right? You might love them, they might be colorful, they might be fun, but at the end of the day, they're pants, right? So there had to be something about the business plan that was exciting to you beyond pants. Was it that it had never been done?
How did you diagnose me so quickly, Jeanette? We've only just met. Yeah, I think the idea of doing something a little bit better has never appealed to me as much as doing something new. I don't know where that comes from. It's sort of a desire to leave a mark, or maybe for my life to have mattered, a feeling of I did something that hadn't been done before. And you're right, pants had been done before. I don't know. We've had pants for a long time, since the toga or something like that. And some very old category, but the internet in '07, e-commerce in particular, in the soft goods category was brand new. There wasn't it's funny when you think about it. We sold electronics and books online before we sold clothing, which, it makes sense. Is it going to fit? How are you going to try it on? These were obvious questions. Apparel is a category with a lot of returns. And we took inspiration from Zappos, which was doing quite a good job selling other brands, existing brands, footwear. And in 2007 in Silicon Valley, there was a rumor that this company was selling $100 million worth of shoes via e-commerce. And that was the signal to me of, well, wait, if you can be selling soft goods online from existing brands, what would be in the way of building a brand online? And of course, that question was, well, how are you going to find customers? Because it's one thing to be buying Nikes on Zappos.com is different than to be buying Bonobos pants on Bonobos.com, because no one knew what Bonobos was. And that was kind of the unresolved question.
So, another interesting thing about your business plan that I think is different is that customer service played a big role in the business. And, again, customer service, I think, would have been a thing you would think about more if you were buying a piece of technology or a computer where you really needed help. Again, like we're talking about a relatively simple product, yet customer service played a big role. So I think first, can you just talk about that? Like, why did you think that was important?
I had been on the service side in retail. I used to sell watches at Marshall Fields in Chicago, which was the storied department store chain before it was acquired by Macy's. I used to go with my grandmother there growing up. And so when I got a chance to work there, it was super exciting. And what I noticed about selling watches was there's either nothing going on, or it's so busy and there's 5 customers there and you're talking to one, and the other 4 are just sort of literally looking at the time like, hey, when's he going to get to me? And I had worked on the night shift at Abercrombie and Fitch selling sweaters. When I was in college, everyone wore these Abercrombie sweaters, and I can still remember they were $72 and I couldn't afford them. And I asked my mom, an Indian immigrant, hey, I want a sweater from Abercrombie. She's like, how much? I was like, $72. She's like, you're out of your mind. Now, she bought me one, but I remember that I needed to work there to get the 60% off discount. And I saw like the chaos of the changing rooms right when the day ended and having to fold everything perfectly with the folding board. So I'd seen how difficult it is to offer a great retail experience, whether that is serving customers who are coming in and making sure you're available, to make sure that the product looks good. And I thought, well, if we can do this via e-commerce, we can solve some of those issues by subtracting the in-person experience from the equation and focusing on the direct to consumer experience. And as with, the idea of looking at what Zappos was doing in the present that inspired the e-commerce idea, there was also looking back to the past to learn from what had happened in the catalog era. And I was lucky that I had worked as a Bain analyst on Sears's acquisition of Land's End. And I'd seen the way that Land's End had built such a loyal following through the catalog model. In fact, I remember being in the call center in Dodgeville, Wisconsin, seeing all these notes written by Land's End customers to their Land's End call center reps. And there was one that said, "Dear Elizabeth, thank you so much for waking me up the morning of my wedding. My mom was a mess. My bridesmaids wanted to sleep in." And I thought at the time, this is bananas that the level of customer intimacy is so high that this woman asked Land's End to wake her up the morning of her wedding. And it occurred to me, okay, the internet is going to be a better catalog. It's going to be personalizable. So if we can do what Land's End did with customer service, building a catalog brand, and what Zappos was doing, selling existing brands through e-commerce, and if we could apply that to building a new brand digitally, I just had a feeling that that was going to work and that that was going to be important.
Yeah. So it's very interesting. And I think for people who don't know your backstory and think like, oh, this young guy was just started this successful business. I mean, you did the work where you worked in the department store, you folded the sweaters, so it's just interesting that you brought to the table an understanding of the problems you were trying to solve. And for anyone in any business, that's part of the formula for success, right? Is understanding the business, understanding the customers, understanding the problem. So I want I just want to highlight that you didn't just jump in and say, "Hey, let's start this business." You really understood the issues. Um, so this event, we're billing it as navigating the unknown, and we'll talk more about that. But you had to take a lot of risk to start this business. You did not know if it was going to work. And sometimes you take risks in business and it doesn't work. So now you're an investor. You're not at Bonobos anymore. Bonobos was sold. You're an investor now. So can you just talk about risk tolerance? Like, how do you decide how much risk to take in business and even in life? Like, what's your formula?
I think it's pretty different. I think that taking a lot of risk at work is a good idea, and taking not so much risk in your personal life is a good idea. And I realize some of that is age dependent. On the personal front, when I was in my teenage years in my 20s, I used to take risk all the time. It felt natural. Like I remember I used to race everyone in my car off the line. Like, how stupid is that? But I literally remember that now. And I'm like, I don't want to race anyone. Like, I don't want to get in a car accident, little things like that. I want to survive as a dad to be a grandparent. Whereas I feel like when I was 20, I wasn't factoring that in. And we could go through a host of other things that have changed from, 20 to 46. I think professionally, my demeanor is actually like, I want to take more risk because I'm a big believer that risk is where you get asymmetric outcomes in terms of the delight that you can bring to people in the world who are your customers, the number of jobs you can create, and the amount of money you can make to make an impact on the world. And I remember my boss at Walmart, we sold Bonobos to Walmart in 2017, and I worked for an amazing entrepreneur named Mark Laurie, who now owns the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Lynx, and who is the founder of a new company called Wonder, before that, Jet.com. And Mark says, like, most people don't realize professionally how much more risk they can be taking. And that's sort of a mindset that I've adopted with my new company, Pi, which is I want to take a huge swing because if it works, it can make a bigger difference. And if it doesn't work, kind of, I don't want to say who cares, but nothing ventured, nothing gained. And so I think of it as a very segmented approach between minimizing personal risk taking and maximizing professional risk taking. I'd say the only intersection that's a little bit scary and hard is financial personal risk taking. And so my wife and I have just bet the farm on our new ventures, and we are really, we're really in trouble if at least one of our two companies doesn't work. But I also think that that's natural because you need the fear of financial oblivion to motivate you to do the unnatural things that are required. And I think at 46, I'm okay with that pressure. If I'm back on this conversation in 20 years, risking financial distress, that would probably be wrong stage, but I'm comfortable at this point. And I think that's the one area personally where you've got to be willing to bet on yourself is financially.
I want you to tell me about the two companies, but first I want to ask you, you said asymmetrical growth. Is that what you said? Hey, what
I
did
think so.
yeah.
Yeah,
Can you,
asymmetric outcomes. Yeah.
asymmetrical. Can you tell us what that means? I would bet that there's a good number of people watching that don't know what that means. And I don't.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry. The idea is if something is going to win, give yourself a chance for it to win big. And I think with Bonobos, we built something really, really cool. And we were also constrained by the size of the market was premium menswear. And premium menswear, in a way, is kind of a small market. And we were also constrained ultimately by the idea that like men's rooted brands don't typically cross the Rubicon to become great at women's apparel. Brands that are good at women's apparel can go the other way, but usually it doesn't go from men's to women's. And so ultimately, I found myself frustrated that I couldn't take the company public. I didn't have a path to building something like Tesla or like Apple or like Amazon. And I promised myself that with my next company, I wanted to work addressing a market opportunity that was massive, global, and where the potential for the business growth was unconstrained by inventory, leases, or physical operations, which is why I'm now working on a consumer software company.
Yeah. So tell us about your new company.
Yeah, so it's called Pi. We're on a mission to defeat social isolation by helping people make friends. We have, according to the Surgeon General of the US, lost 24 hours of in-person time over the last 20 years per month. We're down 24 hours a month of hanging out with other people. And we were already in a challenging situation at the turn of the millennium where we had Robert Putnam wrote the book Bowling Alone about the degradation of the American social fabric, the way that all these forces of automobiles eliminating town squares and upward mobility, meaning we chase the best jobs, but not necessarily build enduring community with our next of kin and our friends. All these forces were already causing us to kind of come apart, and then enter smartphones and screens and the pandemic that has made it even more difficult to be together in groups and to be present with our eyes up, talking than, heads down. And so Pi, our idea, it stands for people I enjoy. Our vision is that doing things you like with people that you like should be as easy as calling an Uber. And we're live in Chicago, Austin, and the Bay Area. We're targeting people from 22 to 35 years old who have just moved to a new city, those three places. And what we offer is a feed of things to do in person, in community. So think about run clubs and playing pickleball and karaoke and trivia, going out at night. There's a big non-alcoholic movement. Where do you go for that? There are social clubs on Pi that are hosting people between once a week and once a month. You can figure out what to go do on the app. And then we're using AI and large language models to figure out who are the people at those things who we think you're really going to click with. So we form groups of six, like six slices in a pie, and we put you together with people that we think you're going to get along with, almost like a dating a dating app match, but for a small group. And the reason for that is that the research shows that we need to run into someone 5 to 7 times in a group setting and then get to mutual disclosure of vulnerable information for a friendship to begin to form. And so our goal is to get people running into each other again and again. And that's how friendships form.
Wow, this is amazing. So I can't wait to hear what you learn from this and how it goes. Um, this is again talking. So you're doing something right now that you're not sure how it's going to work, if it's going to work, what's going to work, and what you're going to have to change. And it's uncertain, right? You're not sure. And that's what everybody watching this today is dealing with, some level of uncertainty in their business. First of all, that's what running a business is, regardless of the times. Times are a little more uncertain right now. A lot of the businesses that are watching are dealing with tariffs and concerns around tariffs. So there's just a lot going on. So just like, and you and I are going to talk a little bit more about mental health in a minute, but like, what is your advice to business owners on just the general concept of dealing with uncertainty and the toll that it takes on one when you're not sure every day whether your business is going to make it
Yeah.
and what challenges you're dealing with?
Yeah. I think it's important, at least I remind myself, like, no one's forcing me to do this, right? I'm choosing this. I'm actively choosing to be a business owner, to be building something. And that at some point, if I'm not in a season of my life where I can handle that, whether that's handle it emotionally in terms of the toll that it can take on my family, in terms of my own mental health. If there is that financial risk that becomes too great to bear, I don't have to do it, right? And I want to recognize and honor that there are some people that are maybe in a situation where they've got to go through, right? Sometimes the only way is through, not out. And I've been there as well, right? I've been in the throes of really, really bad depression. I've been in a situation where I'd raised a lot of money for my last business at one point, over 125 million. I'd hired a few hundred people who I really liked. There was no way out. I had to go through. And then when we sold the company and I all of a sudden was working for the world's biggest retailer by revenues, I was like, oh, this is what it's like to have a job rather than to be a business owner. This is kind of nice. Like someone else is worried about making payroll. And I remember when I sat with the CEO of that company and he said, well, why do you want to sell this company, Andy? And I said, Doug McMillan's his name. I admire him so much, the CEO of Walmart. I said, Doug, I need a job. And he was like, you have a job. I was like, founder is not a job. Founder is a calling. Founder is a labor of love. Founder is a mission, but it's not a job, right? A job is where someone else is worrying about making sure that you make payroll. And I think it was really healthy to have those 3 years where I wasn't responsible, where I was an employee. And I think it's important to recognize and understand which season of our life are we in. Are we in a season where it makes sense to be a business owner? Or are we in a season where maybe we should be working for someone else? Should we sell our business, right? Because usually if you've got some kind of an asset, there's a path to someone else acquiring it. And we can't do this necessarily for 50 years in a row every single day. So I think it's important to recognize that we actively are choosing what we're doing. And if it's not sustainable, it is important to get out, even if that means we have to get out by going through.
Yeah. I love that advice. What season of your life or even of your business are you in, right? It acknowledges that it's not the same all the time. Just now in life, you're launching a new business, you're a parent. What are some of the strategies you have for yourself to kind of balance between all the things we just talked about, like work and home, risk and, safety? Like, what are just some of the strategies that you have to keep yourself balanced?
Yeah, someone was telling me the other day, I forgot, I'm not going to say it perfectly, is like, you can have a few things in life. You can have hobbies, you can have friends, you can have family, and you can be a founder or own a business. Those are 4 possibilities. I think the 5th one was like work out, like work out and take care of yourself. But at any given point, you can only pick 2 of the 5. No, I don't want to say that's exactly true, but it's definitely, there's truth to it. Like I've had to focus so much on building pie and on my wife and child and our family and extended family that it often feels like there isn't time for anything else. And I've also had to remind myself, well, I chose this. So I have to understand what that sacrifice and those trade-offs are. And it's led to me doing some things that have felt unnatural at times, but saying no to a lot of stuff, right? I archive a lot of emails. I try to reply, but I've just learned if I'm spending energy with someone that I really don't have time for, I'm taking that time away from my wife and son. So if I had to balance an hour of extra email and an hour of trying to memorize dinosaurs, I'm going with Ankylosaurus and Stegosaurus every time because I know that's not coming back for me. I'm not going to have a chance to be the father of a 4-year-old, for that long, but there's always going to be email. There's always going to be more meetings and more candidates and more growth opportunities. And I know I can't let anyone down on the business side, but that means that I have to be very intentional about what I do. And all hobbies have kind of gone out the window. I don't have as much time for my friends as I'd like, and I'm okay with it because I know that there will be time for hobbies and time for friendship in a more meaningful way later. And actually, a big part of why I started Pi was my only friends were not in Chicago. And like, how do you maintain a friendship? You can kind of keep it going on text messages and group chats, but a lot of friendship is in person. And that was part of why I realized like I actually need some friends locally who I can see with these like little surgical 1 hour to like get coffee or go to a baseball game. Often it's doing things with other dads. So it's being honest with myself about what I have capacity for and then sticking to it.
This time that our audience has with you is so valuable because you've had a lot of experience starting businesses and working with these renowned and revered leaders of companies like Walmart and other companies. So I want to. We were talking. You just said you have to say no to a lot of things, and I know that when you said that you were talking about in your personal life, but also to work obligations. But when you described the business plan for Pi, it was so specific and really, really focused on a few cities and like 6 people, so you said no to a lot of ideas when you were developing this business plan. You made it really, really specific. So I want to ask you a business question, which is, in all of your experience and all of these people you've worked with, what have you learned about the importance of saying no to ideas when you're running a business that, even though they may be good ideas, but they might not fit exactly what you need to be focused on to be successful? So I'm sorry, that was an incredibly long question, but
No, it wasn't such an important question. And it's so relevant that literally 2 hours ago, I was talking about this. I was with our senior leadership team, our COO, Samir, our VP of product, Brittany, and we were talking to a new potential candidate at the company, a woman who could help us with finance and legal and basically wearing 5 different hats that I call chief of staff. It's a way to get someone who could do a lot into one role. And she was asking us what we struggle with. And my COO, Samir, said, look, sometimes I wonder that we're just doing too many things. And in a weird way, we're always doing too many things. Like it's just sort of human nature of business owners and people who are building things. We are inspired by new ideas. Whereas tending to and maintaining our ideas from days past that are right in front of us can sometimes be hard because it might bore us. We're attracted to the shiny new thing, even though that's going to become the next thing that we're tired of in 2 years or 5 years. So I think there's a constant process of like culling. There's a constant process of reevaluating what would I do today if I could decide anew what to focus on. And the truth is you can. You can do that. You have to do it. Now, maybe it's not daily, but definitely once a quarter and certainly annually, there's got to be a strategic process or at least a series of conversations and maybe a little bit of analysis and getting into the data of like, what's here because it's vestigial and we don't need it anymore? Like, what's our appendix versus what's vital, right? That we've got to tend to it right now. It's our heart, it's our brain versus what can we upgrade and improve, like our physical fitness. So we're constantly trying to have that conversation. And I just want to be honest with everyone, like it's not even a strength. I'm not even good at it, which is okay because I've brought people around me who are, and I'm also non-defensive in my orientation about their ideas. Now, I used to be very defensive, right? I used to treat an idea as sacred or I wanted to be right. Now I just want to get to the truth, which means having people around me who I empower to ask hard questions and also to once in a while, often say, you know what, you were right. Let's go with that. And that often means walking away from things. And it's okay. Like I had a mentor, Joel Peterson, who told me money runs out faster than opportunities. There are always going to be opportunities later. Just because something is a good idea doesn't mean that it's a good idea right now.
so we were going to talk, and you've been open that have struggled with anxiety, and we were going to talk about that. But now I sense a theme in this conversation, but tell me if you think I'm wrong. But it feels like a lot of what we've talked about through this conversation is letting go. You've mentioned many times, like, things that you've had to let go of, like ideas that didn't work, or being right, or not being an expert at everything and having to let go of the need to be an expert and delegating that to someone who is. So do you see a parallel between your ability to manage your anxiety and your ability to let go of things in running a business? And has that served you well in terms of your own mental health?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't even cover one of the hardest ones, which is letting go of people, right? We're often loyal to people. Some of the best people that I've ever worked with, I've had to let go of, and that's always difficult, and it's hard to prioritize that our loyalty has to be to the mission of what we're building, into the enduring prospects of the business above to any particular person that is a part of it. And it's one of the hardest things for me is to realize when someone's time has come or vice versa. I had a team member come to me over the course of the past couple weeks and say that she was going to start a business and leave. And at first it was, oh my gosh, what am I going to do without her? And then it was quickly, oh, this is amazing. What cooler legacy of her time at Pi than for her to go and start the next company. We joke, we call it, we want to build the Pi Pal Mafia, the way that there's the PayPal Mafia, right? The Elon Musks of the world who were at PayPal and now have gone on to do so many great things. And that's our goal here in Chicago, where we're really struggling with job loss. Chicago is losing its tax base. We're losing jobs. We have companies leaving. Illinois is the 49th most lonely state. So it was a weird one to be like, oh my gosh, this great person is leaving, but also this is our goal, is to throw off a lot of entrepreneurial activity, is to create a petri dish where great entrepreneurs can be formed. And so sometimes the greatest heights that someone ascends to who works for you is after they leave. And how do you create those conditions? So that definitely comes to mind with your question. And then related to mental health, I had a closeted journey with a mood disorder called bipolar 1. While I was building Bonobos, I was riding two roller coasters, the entrepreneurial roller coaster and all the highs and lows, as well as a mood disorder that affects, we think, 2 to 3% of American adults, but 11% of entrepreneurs, which is bipolar, which for those not familiar is effectively, it's an illness where you have periods of really elevated mood and then periods of depression, often catatonic or crippling depression. And so that journey of getting healthy, to your point, led me to have to let go of a lot of things. I had to stop drinking. I had to learn to take medication every day and sort of swallow my pride around not wanting to be medicated and realize something I have to do every day. Making time to see a therapist or a psychiatrist at least once a week via Zoom, if not twice. Uh, I am a night owl. I love to stay up late and learning to figure out how to get to bed in time and sleep enough. And then, kind of getting focused in my family life around, all the other things that I used to like to do, week to week. I used to love to go out for dinners and drinks and all that's out the window now. Like I don't go out to dinner. I turn down dinners at home. So yeah, you're right. There is some convergence between, getting focused in one's professional life and getting focused in their personal life. I do think there's congruence there that's important.
Do you think that that discipline that you've established in managing your life, your personal life and your mental health has benefited you in running a business? That kind of discipline?
I think it does benefit in sort of the more obvious ways of like more willpower. Willpower is a muscle. The more that you create constraints for yourself that you can adhere to, the stronger you are at saying no or yes to the next thing that comes up in an intentional way. We all know this, right? A day where we exercise, we tend to eat better because you don't want to give up those gains. You're like, well, if I could wake up this morning and exercise for half an hour, I could probably stare down that Danish at lunch, at the meeting and walk away from it. Whereas for me, at least, I feel like I throw it all, throw my hands up. It's like, I'm not eating well. Now I'm going to not exercise. And it's sort of like a virtuous or an unvirtuous cycle. And I also think there's a hidden benefit of that discipline, which is the perspective that comes from realizing that our work isn't as important as our health, right? Without our health, we don't have anything. Without our family and our loved ones' healths, we don't have anything. Someone said, everything is a problem until your health is a problem, and then nothing else is a problem. We've all been through those moments in our lives where we have to tend to the health crisis of a loved one or our own. And then all of a sudden, nothing else matters but that. And so at 46, I went to the doctor last year and he said, Andy, you're 45, but biologically you're 55. You've got this issue, you've got that issue. We need to look into your cholesterol. You might have to take a statin. We got to check the plaque in your arteries. Your dad has a history of prostate cancer. Let's go test that. He's doing okay, thank God. But there were all these things that I realized, oh, this is what I got to make sure I get right. I gotta try to endure here so that I can be around for my loved ones. The business is whatever. I mean, it's not whatever. Obviously, we wouldn't be here talking about it if it was whatever. But if you think about it on a relative basis, it's just not as important. And so sometimes I have to abstract away from it and say, you know what? It's just a company. It's just a company. We have Chapter 11 in this country for a reason. We have tried to build a system where professional failure doesn't need to lead to personal financial ruin. And we've got to get our legal structure and ducks in a row and do that right because we don't want to be we don't want to get sunk financially because our venture doesn't work. But it's just nice knowing, you know what? It's just a company. It's going to be okay. If it doesn't work, it's going to be okay. And by the way, it might be okay or good if it doesn't work so that we can move on to something that does.
Yeah. Well, that brings me actually to my last question, which my previous interview before this, a couple weeks ago, I interviewed Brian Scudamore, who founded 800 Got Junk. And our whole interview
Oh,
was about failure because he is just
yeah.
so big into talking about how failure is really such a gift and, you learn from it. So why don't we end today's interview because you were just talking about, being okay with the possibility of failure and prioritizing your personal life. So can you share with me a little bit about your thoughts about failure and the benefits or the silver linings of that?
I think that one important thing that I learned from writing a book about my journey with bipolar was I assumed that if I put that story out there, that no one would want to work for me, that no one would want to ever give me money, that I could never get a loan. And what I realized from putting out the word was no one cares. No one was sitting around thinking about me, wondering, hey, is this someone that I would work for or would back? They were thinking about themselves. So what was required of me and what is required to be an employer, to be someone who can take out a loan is that I'm reliable and dependable, right? And all of a sudden I had this realization of like, everyone is going around the world right now thinking about themselves. So when it comes to failure, it's not an issue for everyone else. It's just an issue for you. Everyone else is going to be okay if you fail as long as you're okay. They're going to be worried about you. They're not gonna be like, "What a failure she is." They're really able to hold the idea that what happens at a company or with a business is separate from the merits of someone's character, right? Of course, if it keeps happening again and again, it becomes a real issue, and we need to figure out, "Okay, what did I learn from that?" So that the next one, you don't wanna keep failing. But failing once, failing up is great if you can get over the identity challenges that we have. How do you rebuild your self esteem? That's the question. And that's where I think therapy is so important. When we have suffered a professional loss, we probably can't deal with that ourselves. We can't put that all on our spouse or our best friend. You got to find someone to talk to about it. And so when we're in these periods of crisis in our lives, I really advocate for spending 6 months once a week with a trained mental health professional who can help us navigate that so that we can come out of those challenges on top.
That's great. Thank you. I think that's great advice. And I'm going to end it there. So thank you so much for your time, Andy Dunn. Andy was the founder of Bonobos, and you are now an investor and starting a new company called Pi, which we can't wait to hear more about. So thank you so much.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much to Andy for joining me today. This was a great conversation and I learned a lot. Thank you so much to the audience. I appreciate your time and being here. And thank you to our sponsors, Dell, Oracle, and Square. I look forward to seeing you again at our next C Suite to Main Street. We'll be sending you an invite in your inbox very soon. Everybody have a great day.